Hey, what's up guys, Josh's Boost here and welcome back to another Digimon video. Today, for like the first time in maybe even a year, I'm gonna be doing another Digimon tier list for the current EX3 format, which we will be in for quite a bit, until February I think. So definitely think it's worth it. I know a lot of YouTubers do it like before the format actually starts, but I think you don't really have like all the information you need at that point, right? Because there's no tournament results, so you don't really know what's actually popular. So you know that's like makes a big difference in how certain decks are or will be performing. And of course that will change during the format as it goes. But I still think it's nice to have some kind of starting point to go from. But we did have some ulti cups. I think I've played some locals. I've done some testing, so I definitely think I can make an educated guess about how this format will actually be until February. As you can see, we have a lot of decks. I think there's like 28. So I don't want to spend too much time rambling and rather just get into it. However, I do have to explain first how I rank certain tiers. So like tier 1 is like, obviously it's like the best tier. If a deck is in this tier, I think it will be winning tournaments. It should be winning tournaments. You expect these decks to perform well and to actually win bigger tournaments. Tier 1.5 is like these decks are also expected to win tournaments, I guess, but not as much so as tier 1. And like the biggest difference for me is these decks are more like matchup dependent. So when a certain deck becomes more popular, this deck will have a higher chance to perform really well. But if you don't understand what I mean right now, you will when I get into the decks. Then tier 2 is decks that you expect to perform decently, like they may get like one top. If they get lucky, they can win a tournament, I guess, but like luck has to be really on the side of this deck. And but yeah, it's not like trash, right? It's still, you can still play this and you can definitely perform, but maybe not expect to win every single time. And then tier 3 is basically like everything below that. You shouldn't be expected to top with these kinds of decks. If you're really lucky, you can top, but winning with one of these decks will be like nigh impossible. And then for fun, like with tier 3, my expectations are really low, and with for fun, they're even lower. Yeah, these decks are just like kitchen table decks. Basically, you shouldn't really be expecting to win anything, not even matches, with these decks. Now that may sound pretty harsh, but yeah, I think that should pretty much be it. Now, as we can see, we have EX3 as the first deck we'll be looking at. Basically, this is a little bit like a blue Bloomlord, I guess. Like, it goes really wide and does stuff like that. However, I think it's a lot weaker than Bloomlord. Bloomlord actually has quite a good control option, I think, and EX3 also tries to do this, but just it can't do it as well as Bloomlord can. We haven't seen this deck top at all in like any tournament, or any of the bigger tournaments anyway. I don't think it's bad per se. It's definitely not for fun, because it can definitely do strong stuff, and I think the cards inherently are pretty good. EX3 itself is also pretty strong in my opinion, but yeah, it doesn't have any results yet, and I'm not sure if we will see it, just because there's a lot of decks that are just better than it, and like I said, Bloomlord does the same but better basically. So I'm gonna put this in tier 3 for now, but like it could be like bottom tier 2 to be honest, but I'm just gonna put it in tier 3 for now. Next deck we have, represented by Alphamon Uryuken, is the X-Antibody Alphamon deck. This was obviously a tier 1 contender previously, before the ban list that hit Greymon, which was one of the main parts of this deck, right? It both allowed you to be super aggressive and then also a major stack, really hard to out, and it's at 1 now, so doing that is a lot less consistent. However, we did see this deck actually top 8, I think, maybe even top 4, like it did really well at one of the Ultimate Cups. And I definitely don't think this deck is bad at all. I think it's still quite good, just not, you know, the absolute titan that it was in the previous form before the ban list, where it was definitely one of the best decks. But I'm gonna put it above EX3. I'm gonna put it somewhere tier 2. I think it does well, or it can do well, but it's just really underrepresented because everybody's like, oh, it got hit, it's not good anymore. And this is not the only deck where I'm gonna be saying this about. But yeah, for now tier 2, awful one. Then we have Ancient Greymon here, which I use to represent Red Hybrid, basically. I think we actually also saw Red Hybrid top 1 of the Ultimate Cups in the past weeks. However, I do have to admit, I'm not... Like, I know what the deck does, but I'm not super familiar with it in the context of the current format. So I'm not really quite sure if it was a fluke. Hybrid-based decks are still strong in my opinion, just because even though there is a lot more counterplay to it right now than there was when the cards were first released. Especially right now, there's not a lot of Tamer hate actually being played. And even cards like Death X, which are like anti-Tamer, right, or good against Tamer decks, they don't really interact with the hybrid decks that much, honestly. Even though you can drop it for free. But yeah, I'm gonna put this tier 2 as well. I'm gonna put it after Alphamon, though. But honestly, I don't think they're that different in power level. Next up is Bullstarmon. This is an interesting one, and this is one of the decks that you could... like, it matches the description I gave for tier 1.5. Where, depending how the format shapes up, this deck can be really strong, or it can be really bad. Like, if we're in a format with... stuff like Grandis and Metal Garuru, which are the most represented decks, which we were in for a little while, and they're not playing stuff like a Delicate Plan, this deck can be absolutely insane. You're playing so many security bombs, and just hitting their big stack one time in security with one of those bombs can basically just win you the game on its own. However, it does, as it always has, struggle a little bit with consistency, and there's also just a lot of decks where the deck just isn't very good against, and against those decks it really struggles, both in speed as well as in just, you know, the actual game plan. So I'm actually gonna put this in tier 2. I'm gonna put it above Alphamon and Red Hybrid though, and like this is one of those decks that might move up or down in the tier list depending on how the format shapes up, but for now, even though... looking forward a little bit, Metal Garurumon is probably still the best deck. I don't think this is like a tier 1.5 or tier 1 deck. Then, going for the second of the new EX3 decks, we actually have Bloomlordmon. I think this should be obvious, this is a tier 1 deck. Hydramon is such a good dual boss monster for the deck, and especially the Pomomon from EX3 is just makes the deck so much better in playing control. It can be super aggro, going super wide, super early because of all the low memory costs, and you know, it just outspeeds a lot of decks. It's one of those decks where even if you have a bad matchup, sometimes the deck can be so quick where it doesn't even matter, and you can just beat the bad matchup before they like build up the stack that makes it really hard for you to deal with. We already saw this deck do well. I think it won the Oceanic Ulti Cup and then also had some spots in top 16. It underperformed in I think the North American, or one of the North American Ulti Cups, but I definitely think we will be seeing this deck be a very strong contender. We will be seeing it win big tournaments, so it definitely fits the tier 1 description I gave. Then moving on to my favorite deck, which is D-Brigade, represented by Darkdramon. New support from EX3. I'm just gonna put it in tier 1. I know a lot of people probably won't agree with me, but this deck is always being slapped on like literally every format since its existence. Basically, it has stopped Ultimate Cups where it just, and regionals where it just wasn't represented a lot, right? And that, I think that really speaks to how good this deck actually is. Like, if more people played, I think it would top more, especially with the new support. It is so fast, it's exactly the same as Bloomlord. Sometimes you have a bad matchup, but you can win just by literally rookie rushing your opponent down in the first 3 turns before they can even really set up. And with the new support, it also has a more of a control aspect to it, which makes it a lot better than it was before. I don't think it's better than Bloomlord by any stretch. However, it does have some good matchups. It can play security bombs, which are very strong. It's really fast. Yeah, I think this is definitely a tier 1 contender, and we might see this actually win like a regional or Ultimate Cup. I wouldn't be surprised. Then another deck which I quite like, Dragonite. I think this deck's very good, and again, I think this deck's very underrepresented. Especially, you know, before EX3, not a lot of people played it, but it is very strong, and there was one player, I can't remember his name, but I think he topped like 2 Ulti Cups in a row or something with this deck, like top 8, so he did really well with it. Shout out to him. And I think if more people played it, it would perform better. Personally, I played 2 Store Championships with this deck, and I won both of them. I think this deck is very good, and this is gonna be the first tier 1.5 deck. I think it's heavily slept on. I just don't think inherently it's as powerful as some of the decks will be in tier 1. And it also really struggles against Def X, which might be a very popular card this format, we'll see. And you know, if everybody is playing Def X, then this deck automatically becomes less good. But yeah, in my opinion, this is gonna be a tier 1.5 deck. Then moving on, we have probably the most hyped deck from EX3. I mean, if we're not counting Bloomlord getting a new support right, is Examon. A lot of people were very hyped about this. I personally thought it would be very strong. I've played it at 2 locals now. I playtested with it a little bit. I've watched Ultimate Cup results, and yeah, I'm sorry, Examon fans, but I'm gonna be putting this in the tier 2. It's disappointing. What can I say? I think it's very cool, and there is definitely actually no. I'm gonna put it in tier 1.5 because there's definitely matchups where this deck basically auto wins, which is very nice. Like the matchup against Grand Kuwaga, amazing, very good. Matchup against Metagarurumon, also very, very good. However, some matchups are just super, super hard. Something like Blue Star, almost impossible to beat. Blue Flare is also really, really tricky with this deck. Basically, anything that bounces your stack is going to be a problem. Evade, super cool mechanic, but against decks where it doesn't really accomplish much, it's just super weak because the deck is slow. It's really hard to set up your stack, and then if they just get rid of it, it's rough. However, if you're in a tournament and you play against like Medogarurumon for 4 rounds and Grandis for 2 rounds, that should be pretty strong. So I'm gonna be putting it in like bottom tier 1.5. Again, I was gonna put it in tier 2. I'm really not super excited about this deck, but I am excited about it. I just don't think it's very good. Sorry, Examon stands. I really love the deck as well. I'm gonna try my best to make it as good as possible, but for now I'm not quite as convinced as I am for some other decks. Then moving on to another pet deck of mine, 4 in a row now. We have Gaiomon, obviously a big fan of that deck. I thought honestly it was the best deck in tier in the BT9 format, like no cap. I thought it was the best deck, no contest even. Metagarurumon was like a hard matchup, but I thought the deck was better. However, now some matchups just are really hard. Bloomlord is super fast. Like if they don't immediately kill you, then your matchup is good, but they can just outpace you so hard. Same goes for D-Brigade, they can really just outpace you. Examon is like a super hard matchup. Grandis is a super hard matchup. Metagarurumon, like I mentioned, is not like a good matchup. Yeah, it's rough to be a Gaiomon player, and with pain in my heart, I'm gonna be putting it in at like top tier 2. I still think it's good. It's like a very decent anti-meta pick. Depending how the format shapes up, it can definitely move up in the ranking. For now, even though it's inherently so strong, there's just a lot of bad matchups for it. Right now, Dark Knightmon also a very hard matchup, and if you really are trying to counter build for the format, then you are sacrificing consistency, and it's just rough. It's rough, but I still think the deck is definitely good, and I wouldn't be surprised if it wins a tournament. I wouldn't be super surprised or anything. I definitely think it can top, but it's not a good time to be a Gaiomon player. Then next up we have Genmon, which also got support in the EX3, and I've actually seen a lot of people be very excited about this. Like they think it's really good. Personally, I'm not so sure yet. I don't think Genmon has ever been super good. And yeah, the new support, it is definitely nice, but I'm really not sure if it can somehow push it up to tier 1. Like, I'm fairly certain it can't. It really suffers against security bombs as well, which is rough. Even though sometimes, you have the Crimson mode, of course, which helps you against that. But you already have to be super late game to do that, right? Yeah, I'm gonna be putting this at tier 2 as well. I think it's about as good as Gaiomon is, to be honest. And maybe like it could be better than I'm saying right now. I'm not sure. Prove me wrong. But yeah, moving on, Grandis. Yeah, this deck has been good for such a long time, right? And the weird thing is, I don't even think it's good, but it can just cheese you so hard, and it does it so often. It's, again, one of those decks, like, if the matchup is bad, you're gonna have a bad time. However, the thing it does, it's just super degenerate. It just comes out of raising and then it murders you. And there's very few decks that actually have counterplay against it when it happens. It does suffer inconsistency sometimes, and when you can't immediately cure your opponent when the stack comes out, you basically lose because the deck is not good at playing control. You only have one turn to do the big push because of the Digiburst effect of Grenkuaga. But yeah, I can't deny it being a good deck, and I'm actually gonna put it in tier 1.5. It's again one of those decks really dependent how the format shapes up, where it can be super good or not be good at all. Yeah. Then next deck, I have not a Digimon representing it, but a Tamer, because I had a hard time figuring out which Digimon I want to represent the deck, which is Dragonic. Honestly, I'm gonna be putting it just right over there. I don't have that much to say about it. I think it's just suffers from some inherent issues, just design-wise. You really need the Hina Tamer to do good stuff. And even if you have the Hina Tamer and you're doing your good stuff, it's not that good. You can sometimes super cheese your opponent with Ragnar Lord Mondo, which is funny, I guess. And I'm not saying like the deck is terrible. Again, I don't even think Aegis Ramon is terrible. I think it's good, but it's just... it's missing something. The design is just not quite there. Yeah, it suffers a little bit from what most dual color decks suffer from, in my opinion. Like Examon. Only what Examon does is just better and more consistent than what Dragonic does. Next up, we have another non-Digimon represented deck, Holy Wave. It's, yeah, everybody's favorite deck. Security Control. I'm just gonna put it here in tier 1.5. At the top, actually. So often we see this deck just come out of nowhere and then do insanely well. Like get so many tops in top 16 or top 8 at the bigger tournaments. It's, again, super meta dependent. Sometimes it's like insanely good and sometimes it's not good at all. But it's always just kinda there. And if your deck's not built to play against it, you're gonna have a rough time. Yeah, tier 1.5, this is literally, when I was describing tier 1.5, this is like the deck I'm talking about. Yeah. Alright, moving on to more EX3 fun. We have Imperial Ramon, purple, red, red, purple. So I definitely think this deck is good. A lot of people are like, oh, it's a casino deck, yada yada. And yes, you do have to get lucky, I suppose. You do have to get the right setup to do the thing. But the thing you do is very strong. Yeah, I'm gonna be putting this... it's gonna be like a tier 2 deck, probably somewhere over here. I definitely think this deck could win a tournament. Like, if the pilot is good at playing it, and if he, you know, just high rolls the entire tournament. This deck is very, very strong. It definitely has good matchups. I definitely think against Security Control, something like, you know, just inbuilt ADP, right? Very powerful. But yeah, you do have to get lucky, and maybe I'm overestimating this deck, I don't know, but for now I'm gonna be putting it there. Then, moving on, we have another Imperial Dramon, which is just the old school one, the blue-green one. This actually won the Ulti Cup, I'm pretty sure. I think this won the Oceanic Ulti Cup, which I think is cool. Definitely not expected. I'm gonna be putting this in tier 2, and it's just... I honestly think like Gaiamon, Galantmon, this deck, and this deck, they are kind of like the same power level. I think Imperial Dramon has been a little bit outclassed, right? There's just decks that try to do the same thing, but do it better. However, you can still play like security bombs in this deck. The control aspect of this, actually, it's not bad. It's just one of the things, you can definitely, if you're really good with it, I think you can surely top a big event with it. You can even win it like it literally did. But I don't think it is quite as good as a tier 1 deck. And I also don't think it's quite as good as the decks that are up here. So yeah. Then moving on, Jesmon, this is a fan favorite, of course. So I hope nobody's gonna be mad at me, but I definitely think Jesmon is not a very, very good deck. I think, honestly, I know a lot of people are very excited about it. They think it's like, you know, one of the best decks, tier 1, tier 1.5 maybe, but I don't think so. I'm gonna be putting it right over there. So a lot of tier 2 decks in my opinion here. Very, very crowded. Um, yeah, I think what it does, like, it seems powerful, right? But it can't finish the game in one turn unless you have like the perfect hand, perfect stack. And once you do the play, you do set up this really powerful feud, but this really powerful feud, it does lose against DefXmon. And yes, I know that's why you play Solarmon, and you really want to play the Solarmon down, etc. Sometimes you just can't, sometimes you have to go for the push. And you can't play down the Solarmon. That's just what the reality of it. And then you get absolutely destroyed by DefX. And there's even some decks that just on the clapback they can definitely just beat the deck. Gaiamon, for example. If Jesmon comes out and it does like 5 security checks but doesn't finish the game, then Gaiamon can just come out and clear the entire field. And there's definitely more decks that can do that. I don't think it's a bad deck. I just don't think it's quite as good as any of the decks I have above it. Like, it's probably just basically the same in power level as Gaiamon is. I think Gaiamon's like slightly better. Yeah, sorry Jesmon fans. We also just see there has been quite a lot of tournaments with Jesmon being an option, and it just hasn't been doing very well. It took some top spots here and there, and then mostly even like top 16, not even top 8, and yeah, I don't know. So yeah, another hybrid deck. We have a yellow hybrid here. This actually won one of the Ultimate Cups. I'm not sure, I can't remember which one, but it definitely did. Oh, I think it was actually before the EX format started. It was like the less European BT10 one. But yeah, it definitely proved it is a strong deck. I also think since it won the tournament and it's definitely very underrepresented, like nobody's playing this deck, that really speaks to how good it is. However, I don't really have a lot of experience with this deck in the current format at all. I haven't played against it. I haven't seen it in action. I haven't played it myself. So it's kind of hard for me to rank it. I'm just going to put it in tier 1.5 just because it has had that one super good showing. And I don't think a lot of people jumped on the bandwagon after that to, have it stay that successful. So I'm going to put it in tier 1.5, but it's like kind of, I don't know. Yeah. Moving on, another bad deck of mine, Justimon. I'm sorry, Justimon fans, this is a for fun deck. Yes, when it goes off, it is super fun. You can do 10 checks. That's like the most insanity any deck in this list can do. However, it takes so much time to build up. Like, it makes me so sad to think about it. The bottom end of this deck is absolutely trash. You need so much to do the thing, and then if you do the thing and you'll hit like one security bomb, it's over as well. Like, there's no protection. Even I was playing like hero at ADP, and even then you need even more setup to do the thing right. I'm sure at some point this deck will be good. Like, if it just keeps getting support at some time, at some point it's gonna get good support, and then it's gonna be a tier 1 deck. But that support should be in the low end, I think, and not in the high end. We already have like a super good high end combo. But we're just not getting there fast enough, and it isn't sturdy enough, basically. So yeah, sorry Justin, you are the first for fun deck in this list. Then we have blue hybrid. This is basically how do you say it? Blue flare at home at this point. Yes, we got what's it called? Surai, the new option, which I guess is like support for this deck indirectly. But I really feel like if you're playing this, why you're not just playing blue flare, which I think is actually a really good deck. I'm gonna put this in tier 3, and then I'm sorry, EX3 decks, but I'm gonna actually be putting it above you. Sorry. Everybody, do you remember when this was like the best deck, and when you saw your opponent flip up whichever Digimon they played, you got like a little bit sad inside, like you had to cry a little bit. Yeah, this is not that time anymore, which is nice, definitely, because I was not a big fan of playing against this. And here we found a friend for Justimon. I'm sorry, Machine Dramon fans. Maybe in BT11 this deck will finally not be a fun deck anymore when we get Analog Man. It's kind of insane how much support this deck has gotten and how not good it is still. Also really sad because I think it's very cool. I think the mechanic is very original, very fun. I definitely think... Okay, I'm not gonna lie. I think it's like better than Justimon. Like, I could consider putting it in tier 3 right now because of all the new support it has gotten, but it's still a little bit lackluster. it just suffers consistency issues because of how you have to build the deck. Yeah, what's there to say about it? Moving on, we have Armor Rush, which is, I think it's a good deck. I think it's good. I think it belongs in the group over here with like Gaimon all the way until this Imperial Digimon. And then I think it's probably like over here. We did see this win Ultimate Cup, I think, or maybe a regional, like a big one. The deck is versatile, it's very consistent. There's also just some matchups where it can really shine, especially if you're playing, you know, hard into the Magnamon X antibody. There's just some decks that really struggle against this deck. Just take, for example, D-Brigade will have a really rough time against this. But there's also decks which just absolutely demolishes, like Dark Nightmon, for example, just has such an easy time playing against this. I would also assume something like Examon has a very good time against this. Yeah, and again, the power level of the deck is not very high, right? It's not like Alphamon or Gaiamon, where if you finally get to do the thing you want to do, where it's like super powerful, or Jesmon, you know. It just, what it does is just kind of mid, but it does it very consistently, and, well, it's not mid, it's good, it's just not super crazy. But I definitely think this is one of those decks that you can take to an Ultimate Cup, and you can definitely perform with it. Like, win, I'm not so sure, but you can definitely top. Then we have Security Control 2.0. Shout out to my friend Matthijs, please don't be mad at me, but yeah, this is a deck that belongs somewhere over here, I think. Do I think it's better than Grandis? Yes. Do I think it's better than Dark Nightmon? I'm not so sure. Do I think it's better than Security Control? It's basically the same deck, right? Nah, I'm just kidding. This is just another one of those decks where, depending on the format, it can be absolutely insane or not. Basically for the same reasons as Security Control. Only this deck, I like it more because you can actually play proactively, where Security Control can't. And you also have like an easier time stalling if you want to go for deck out, which is like a legitimate win condition for this deck. I definitely think Mastermon is one of those decks that can win a big tournament if you get lucky enough, because it does suffer from some consistency issues, but it is very strong for sure. I think tier 1.5 for it is pretty good. Then yeah, this is the best deck. I think it has been for a while now, and I think it still is. It's super consistent. It kind of, like, what it does is the same as Grandis, like, it just comes out of nowhere and then murders you, but then the control aspect of this deck is actually a lot better than Grandis. You have better defense, you have better field control. It also got a boost in the form of the new Omnimon X antibody from BT10, which is definitely very strong in this deck. This is not the deck that actually makes the most use of it. We'll be getting to that, but yeah, what should I say about this deck, right? Everybody knows how strong it is. If there's like a bad matchup, sometimes you can just outrush them and just murder them with your Wergarurumon. Yeah, this deck is insane, and it always has been. Then moving on to Blue Hybrid 2.0, Blue Flare. I'm gonna put this at the top of 1.5, especially now with Surai, which is absolutely an insane option. I honestly thought this deck was super undervalued in the BT10 format. Like, I don't understand how it performed so bad. Probably just because everybody was on the Crossheart hype train. I suppose there's like no other reason I can think of why this deck underperformed as much as it did, because this deck is very strong. It can go really aggro. The stun aspect, like, it can literally just stun the entire Jesmon board. Jesmon can do the push, get rid of all your security, and then you just like stun their entire board, and they can have like all the guys in the world. It doesn't matter, you're just gonna win. Yeah, nice deck. Really not looking forward to playing against this with Surai. Yeah, shout out to Chris, Blue Flare, nice deck. Then moving on to Minervamon. I'm not gonna lie, guys, I thought this deck would be tier 1 when BT10 dropped. However, since then it has somehow done absolutely nothing. It hasn't gotten one top 16 spot, I'm pretty sure. And I don't get how. Like, counterplay against this deck seems so rough. Sure, I suppose something like Examon and Gaiamon could be quite rough matchups, but other than that, I really don't see what matchups would be like bad for this deck. And the engine is literally just the strongest thing in the game, right? It just keeps looping infinite memory and just like murdering you with the rush wolves. But it somehow hasn't done anything, and I don't get how. And for that reason, I'm gonna be forced to put it right over here. But I don't want to. I want to put it in tier 1. But I can't until someone proves me wrong and shows me this deck is actually good. Looking at you, Matthijs, please do it. But for now, it's just very, very disappointing. Ragnar Lordmon, yeah, this is one of those guys, right? It did win the recent locals though, or recent locals, I think like 4 weeks ago or something. One of the locals I go to, it was won by this deck. But yeah, I think Ragnar Lordmon, like the monster, is very interesting. It can be splashed in other decks like Dragonlings or even Gaiomon and be really funny there and be a good game ender. But the deck itself, it just doesn't do that much. And like if you build up to Ragnar Lord, it's very, very slow. Yeah. We have an interesting deck here, which is Crossheart, and I'm actually going to be putting this in tier 1.5. Yeah. Yeah, I think it belongs there. I think it's underrepresented right now. I think if more people play this deck would actually do good. It's actually strong. Did you guys know that before the EX3 hit, like in the same weekend, there was a Ulti Cup with EX3 not legal, but with the ban list in effect in Europe. And someone made top 32 with Crossheart with no Digitama. Like, he made a decklist error. I think his name is Anders. And he made a decklist error. He has a he has a profile up on my channel. He's a very nice guy. And he had to, like, remove the Digitama from his deck after round 3, I think. Because he got deck checked. And then he just played on the entire event. And he still went, like, X2. No Digitama. Just imagine how good this deck actually is if it has Digitama. As well as because people are just not building against it as hard anymore, right? People are actually playing like anti-Crossheart decks in BT10. People are not doing that now, and I think even though, yes, the hit was quite rough, I still think the deck's very good. And then the last deck for today is gonna be War Gremlin X. And I'm gonna be putting it in tier 1. This deck has suddenly, I don't know how, like, in BT9, we had Wargrey X, but Gaio was just the better Greymon deck, basically. In every aspect, it definitely dominated Wargrey X in results. And then, all of a sudden, Omnimon X antibody is released. Wargrey X has, like, a little bit extra push and has just good matchups against Melga, specifically. And it's just stopping tournaments left and right. It might have won an Ulti Cup. I think so. It definitely topped, like, multiple tops. This deck is suddenly so good. And performing so well. I really hope it will be able to keep that up. Because I think the deck's very cool. And I really think it's cool. Wargremlin X gets a chance to shine. Omnimon X Antibody is a huge boost for this deck. Because it makes the threshold from where you can suddenly, you can suddenly just kill your opponent lower, which is nice. Yeah, Wargremlin X, it's good, and I think it's one of the top 3 decks. Yeah, I think I'm pretty happy with how the list is looking right now. A lot of tier 2 decks, a lot of tier 1.5 decks. And honestly, like, if tier 1.5 didn't exist, like, if you don't agree with that existing, those also should be in tier 2, I suppose. I just think they're slightly better than the tier 2 decks. Yeah, 28 decks, I think, and we did it in little short of 35 minutes. Yeah, I hope you enjoyed it. I hope it was fast-paced enough to keep it interesting. Let me know what you think about some of the placements, about the placement of your favorite decks. Are there any decks I missed? Like, I wasn't gonna do even more decks than this, but if you have a deck that I missed you think is really good, be sure to let me know. If you think that D-Brigade is actually shite, should be in for fun, let me know. Yeah, and if you do enjoy Digimon content, be sure to like, subscribe, and if you do, I'll see you in the next one. Bye!